Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the queen of the beat herself. It's Heidi MacDonald. Thanks for coming on, Heidi.
No problem, David. Thanks for having me on. I guess it's like our kind of annual chat now.
Yeah. It's funny because you and Brian Hibbs seemingly always come in like September and October-ish. And so it ends up being like beat month on Off Panel accidentally.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, also it's like I feel like we always talk right around New York Comic Con, and that is happening the week this drops. And I want to talk about New York Comic Con to start and cons in general. But the first thing I was wondering about is like, I don't get to go to cons very often. Like, I live in Anchorage, Alaska. This is like, it's like a special thing. It's like when you get to go out for dinner when you're a kid and you're so excited about it. But for you, I mean, okay, you just were at SPX. I've seen you at a different con this year. Do you still get excited for cons? Is that a thing?
Yes, absolutely. And but I did, after San Diego, it took so much out of me that I actually bailed on a couple cons that I was supposed to go to. I bailed on Keystone, and I bailed on another one, and I actually took the whole month of August and stayed home. There was FlameCon here in New York, so I wasn't entirely con free, but I had to take a break. And I don't think, well, no, that's not true. I'm going to Baltimore a couple weeks after New York Comic Con. So yeah, I do. And sometimes it's because, well, you can't help but get excited for San Diego because really it's, the fiscal year ends, the comics fiscal year ends in San Diego, and a new cycle begins. I think that's probably why we talk at this time, because I think as New York Comic Con is starting, even though it's the fall, really a whole new cycle is kind of beginning. And, it's a very interesting time in the industry. And, I get excited for a couple different reasons. One of them is that I like traveling to places, and, I have my things that I do. I've been to Emerald City a couple times in a row now. And I kind of have some places that I like going in Seattle. I have some little Seattle traditions, and I don't know, it's fun to travel. I find it's more fun to travel when you have like 200 to 300 of your friends near you than all by yourself, I found. So
that is the funny thing about cons is like, especially if you go to them a lot, like people like you and like Chris Butcher. And then I was talking to Amy Wright for a piece I did about libraries recently, and she was talking about how she had been to like 50 plus cons in like the last 2 years. And I was just like, oh my God, like I can't even imagine that. But at the same time, like, you tend, I imagine you kind of see like the same people a lot. And it's like, it's almost like you're traveling with your friends. It's like a community vacation, except for it's at cons.
It's like a Grateful Dead tour is what it's like. And last year, I did a lot of cons. I forget. I did 13, 14, 15 cons. And because I felt like it was my year to just travel as much as I possibly could and go as many places as I could and to see what was going on in the world. And so this year, I kind of switched it up a little bit and went to a different amount. But last year, it really was like, a tour. It was like, I started seeing people at the start of the year in Long Beach, and then I saw them in Chicago, and then I saw them in Seattle, and then I saw them a little while later at another show, and then, the retailer summit. It was just like, book expo, library. So I did see people just every few weeks, and it was, I mean, it's nice, but it also kind of is, it is. It's a little bit like being on tour, I guess. It's like this bursts of activity.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting too, because it's like the con scene has like blown up so much that it's like, you could really go to a different con every single weekend for like the entire year. But now it's like you could almost go to multiple cons every single weekend for the entire year.
Sure. Just like William Shatner. Yeah.
Is that what William Shatner does?
Well, some celebrities do. I think he's actually cut back a bit on his travel, but there was a few years ago when Shatner would do like 3 cons in a weekend. He'd just get on the plane and he'd go to all of them. But there are some celebrities who do 2 cons in a weekend now. Although that nerd celebrity circuit is definitely slowing down.
Well, yeah, that was one of the things I was wondering about, because it's like you go to all these cons. A lot of cons. You've been going to cons for years. It kind of feels like, I feel like the direct market has had this kind of like peak that happened after like the New 52, and then like about 2 or 3 years after that, it's kind of slowly started dropping off again. And then it kind of feels like almost the con scene has followed the same path where it was, maybe 2013, 2014, where Hall H was at its like peak of its powers, and
right.
it was like everything. Every movie was like debuting there, and now it's kind of like fallen off a fair bit. Like, do you feel like can you feel that when you're out there? Like, does it seem like that?
Yes, it does, but it definitely seems like I would say absolutely that period. It's also when you saw shows like the Phoenix Con and Salt Lake City Convention, Denver. Like those are kind of three huge shows that kind of started around the same period. Not Phoenix didn't necessarily start, but it just got really, really big. And you saw kind of things just heightening, and then all of these nerd celebrity circuits kind of came in. This heroes and villains, Walker Stalker thing came in, and we did. I mean, I do track it quite a bit, and we just saw sellouts all the time. Like all these shows were sellout. The fire marshal was shutting them all down, and there was just kind of this crazy like, oh my god, how far can it go? And it's absolutely stabilized right now. I mean, for one thing, almost all of the venues are, full up,
Right.
and, there's no more room in New York at Javits. There's no more room in San Diego at the San Diego Convention Center. Most of these events take up all of their local facilities. And so, kind of a cap has been put on them in some ways. And then the whole nerd celebrity circuit. I mean, this is I don't remember if we talked about this last time, but this is for sure something that I was talking about with people last year, and you're really seeing it now, is that we are not seeing a new Game of Thrones or a new Walking Dead. We don't have this show, this movie. I mean, the MCU is huge, of course, but we're not seeing this new franchise where when the nerd celebrities, kind of create all this excitement that they're going to be there necessarily.
Right. Yeah. It seemed like to a certain degree, New York was kind of like hanging its hat on Deadly Class. And then that didn't really work out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they do have like Hiddleston and they have Paul Rudd, which is pretty great. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. It is interesting that there's like all these different things that are kind of dependent on having that water cooler show. And it's like we're almost past the era of the water cooler show, which which makes it kind of tough. I mean, I don't know. Who knows if there's going to be another one?
Yeah, but I mean, New York Comic Con doesn't really have celebrities. I mean, they have Hiddleston and Rudd, but I mean, that's not even the focus of the show.
No.
Whereas, say, if Chris Hemsworth went to C2E2, it would be like, oh my God, Chris Hemsworth is coming. But it's. I mean, people are definitely excited for Paul Rudd.
But it's not what it's about.
No, it's not what it's about at all. I mean, I heard that sometimes when they did have celebrities at New York Comic Con, they didn't make their guarantees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because people are getting in line for the exclusives and even for panels. People are more excited sometimes to see the panels than they are to get to get the photo op, which is it's interesting. I mean, New York Comic Con is very unique. It just has a very unique makeup and a very unique vibe.
The last time I went, there was no presence at Madison Square Garden, which is now a thing, and I don't even think like Hudson Yards was a thing then. And so it's like the whole area of the Javits seemingly has like blown up quite a bit. And I don't know if it's because of these types of events or what, but also it was kind of like a dead zone before. Like you would just walk there, and it was just like if you want to get food, there was like some vendors out front, but that was about it. But I do want to talk about kind of your approach to cons, just because I do like, the beat, we were talking about this recently, like you guys have presence at like Rose City Comic Con, you were at, SPX, et cetera, you're at all these different places and you cover that. So for you, like, what is your approach for a con? You personally, like, how do you go into a con and like, do you have like a plan going in? I know you have like your trusty beat team and everything like that. Like, What's your approach?
Well, I generally do the coverage. When I first started the beat, which was 15 years ago, 15th anniversary year, I was the only person, and I would do it all. I mean, I would, maybe I had a couple of stringers. I remember I got my friend to sit in Hall H,
Ooh.
Who wasn't a professional journalist. I mean, she's a writer, but she's not a journalist. And she sat in Hall H for me all day, and she just wrote notes, and then I typed it up at night, and So that's how we did it back then in those days. But yeah, so I kind of have done it all. But now I really I've gone in and covered panels, but I'm just not very good at it anymore. I'm kind of more into the whole game. I've kind of graduated more to I'm going to mess up her name, so I'm not even going to go for it. But the senior observer. I like writing big takes on things, and I like taking in the gestalt of the zeitgeist and distilling it to see what it said. In fact, I was looking at all of my New York Comic Con coverage, and I saw that every year I had written a of a big wrap up piece, and they're almost all the same for New York Comic Con. It's like it was so crowded, but blah 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 blah. In fact, I'm going to do that in my newsletter next week. I'm going to run a little recap of the first 13 years. So yeah, my approach is much more about. I think I approach it a little bit like an athlete might approach a marathon. And my cousin, I've said this on Facebook, but my cousin is a marathoner. I have several cousins who are marathoners, but she ran 2 marathons in 4 weeks, and one of them was an ultra marathon on the trail that was 36 miles, and she finished 6th overall or something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she's just has this incredible endurance and stamina, and that's kind of a thing that runs in my family. Some of us have it, and I definitely have it, but not for marathons. I have it for Comic-Cons. And so I guess when I, like you, leaving Alaska to go to a con, when I was a kid and I would go to a show, I was just so excited to leave the house and be around people, and meet my heroes. And it was just, it was such a powerful experience. And I guess that just never left me. So I still have this kind of I have to be there. I have to see. I have to know what's happening. I have to. And, I used to try to be everywhere, but then you couldn't. But then I realized with Twitter that you could just read somebody's tweet about it and see. It was almost like being there. And now, I have a staff and they go and, they tell me what happened. So I like to kind of, I don't know, my approach is first off, staying healthy.
Yeah.
And I also, one of the things that allows me to do this is, I'm going to totally 100% jinx this, but I generally don't get con crud. And
this is very dangerous territory.
Right, it is
so dangerous.
It is. I'm very good at avoiding con crud. So of course I do get it sometimes. One of the worst con cruds I ever got, in fact, was the first Emerald City I went to. And so I do get it, but I'm pretty good at avoiding it, and just I guess it's kind of for me personally, it's how far can I go? Can I beat my personal best? Can I get by on only 12 hours of sleep for the whole show? And
oh my God,
yeah, and which I used to do. I mean, I don't know. I can go through these periods where I don't need too much sleep, and I'm fairly coherent, somewhat coherent, and going out and hitting BarCon, knocking back a few. I mean, I am a steady drinker, but I'm not a heavy drinker.
Sure.
So I monitor that, and I guess it's just how far can I go? Sometimes it's there's been many times when I'm among the very last people standing outside the Hyatt at San Diego.
Man, I don't have your stamina. I am I don't know. I have this friend who has this. I mean, I think it's a common saying, but she would always say it right as she left the bars, and she's like, "Nothing good happens after midnight." And we're like, "Okay, whatever." And then I started whenever I'd go to cons, I would go out to the bar and everything like that. And invariably by Saturday, I wouldn't have a voice, and right. I would just be dead. And New York is also really bad, but just because I have to travel so far for it, it's 11 to 13 hours, depending on if I can get good flights. And anyways, and so it's I actually find myself going to sleep earlier and earlier. I'm kind of I don't know. It's weird. It's you have that. It's not quite FOMO, but it's you want to be out doing stuff because everyone is there, and it's you want to see all these people, but at the same time you're I don't want to be dead tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and that's the big trade-off. And I definitely get more sleep now. I mean, I definitely, I'm a lot more sensible about turning in. And you're right. There was a certain time when there's just, no reason. And I mean, I can't I guess it is just my thing. I mean, I can't say that anything really memorable happens, when we're hanging out outside. The some convention. It's 3 a.m. and we're all hanging out and drinking beer out of a cooler. Although
That does sound pretty good.
well, you know what? I lied because this year at San Diego, there was a friend who had a yacht that was parked right in back of the Marriott,
Hmm.
and we ended up on a yacht, and so that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, anytime you can have a yacht party, I think that's a pretty good night.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I have to, but I don't know. It's just like you get to. I mean, I think this is really. I mean, cons are obviously one of the things that fascinates me, and probably my life's study is conventions, Comic Cons, and one of the mysteries, enduring mysteries that I just want to crack the code on is why. Comic Cons arose out of science fiction cons, but science fiction cons have stayed this very insular, small, kind of very tribal thing.
Hmm.
And Comic Cons are still have their tribe, but they just get bigger and bigger,
Right.
and there's more and more, and they grow and they expand, and they're very, very inclusive of people. And I guess my thing is why. I wonder why that is. And I've asked a lot of people this, and I've heard lots of theories, and some of them are just that, comics unite art and writing, so they just have more wider appeal, or, other people think it's just more specialized, and somehow that draws people. I think it's partly because it is, words and pictures are very primal to human beings. They're a very important part of how we express ourselves and interpret the world. And something that pretty much everyone does. But I also think that when you go to Comic-Con, you can meet an awful lot of really creative, friendly people very easily.
Yeah.
And that becomes it's very empowering and very enjoyable, I think. And it's everybody wants to be part of it. And I know, you want to talk about the publishing scene, and we'll get to that. But, even if you look at that, you see all these people, they all want to somehow get in on this,
Yeah. I actually think that, I mean, honestly, that's the thing about Comic Cons themselves is like, I don't think there's specialization anymore. I mean, it's really just, they're so broad, and it's really just like a place where people can celebrate the thing that makes them happy. It's like a fan. It's just like,
Yes.
Most of them are like pure fandom. And so it's, I don't know. I mean, it's like the funny thing is like, it's Twitter, except for only positive interactions.
Well, or 95%.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, I mean, but see, that's what I'm saying, though, is that Comic Cons have become the fan fest.
Right, exactly. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. But what's really interesting to me is that so many of these events that have tried to downplay the comics element, they become very stagnant.
Right.
So I mean, the big example right now is the whole Walker Stalker, heroes and villains. Okay, so this is a line of shows that I'm pretty sure that guy who played Green Arrow, whose name I can never remember,
Stephen Amell.
Yeah, so he was one of the early partners in it, and he got the rest of the people from the show to come out, and they got the Walking Dead cast going in when they were really hot to do it, and these shows did very well, no question about it, and a lot of people went to get the autographs, stand in line, get the photo ops, all that stuff. And they had a very small dealer's room, because I've never been to one, but I asked around. They do have a small dealer's room. It's kind of like a Creation Con. Creation is an older line of shows that unbelievably is still around. And, I went to a Hercules Xena Con of theirs once, so I could meet Campbell. Yeah. And like they just had like maybe 10 tables selling like Xena stills, I mean, there was nothing. There was nothing. And so I bet these shows have gone into decline because the shows aren't as popular anymore. And I guess people just, I don't know, they got over it. Amel pulled out. The guy who's running the events now is apparently, this is actually a story. I'm tipping my own story here, but I haven't had time to pursue it. But this guy, has ripped off lots of people. He's ripped off lots of dealers. Like he'll get them table money and then he'll cancel the show and not refund their money. And like he's selling tickets now for like shows like the middle of 2020. So obviously some deficit financing going on. But anyway, my point is these shows came and went.
Hmm.
East Comic Con is the ultimate where they get this super spectacular lineup of celebrities, the whole cast of Justice League or all these guys from the MCU, whatever. And then but they also bring in comics artists because they tried to do just an autograph show
Hmm.
and it didn't work.
There's not enough depth without it. I mean, yeah. I mean, if it's just like the quick photo op, which I don't know if you've ever done one, but they're kind of awkward.
Right.
But I mean, it's just like I don't think they would feel pretty empty. It's like you almost lose all the heart without having all the comics and everything.
Right. Right. Well, that's it. Exactly. It just seems more shallow and unfulfilling without having the comics give life
Right.
because you walk around, you see the artists sitting there sketching and drawing like they're doing something, like they have this aura of actual productivity and creativity. So, and listen, I was very skeptical of the ACE model, but they seem to have, they didn't go out and, oh, we're going to do 20 shows. It's like they only do 3 or 4 shows a year.
Right.
And they specialize in just doing these really super big shows. And, they people seem to go there and get what they want. I mean, Wizard World is the other one too, and everybody says, oh, there's less comics. And, I mean, I'm not going to put a bad name on, any people who go to the Wizard World Artist Alley, but, it's not a lot of household names. So all of these kind of there are autograph shows,
Hmm.
and nobody talks about them.
I mean, we were talking about baseball before we started recording. There's like the National Baseball Card Show or Sports Card Show.
National.
Yeah, and like there's like that massive, the massive one that they have, and it's like there are so many former athletes, or I mean, that are actually there to sign, and it's like it is kind of amazing. Like that is it is kind of a precursor, but it's funny that those types of things aren't quite as big. But I guess it's because sports cards aren't quite as big, really, in the national zeitgeist.
What they don't, but this is the thing. Like, I mean, there's a deeper truth here. And I haven't quite I haven't quite found its final form yet. But when you go, I went to it wasn't the National, it was like the biggest baseball card show in New York when I was a kid because I collected baseball cards before I collected comics. And I remember that Keith Olbermann was there because he was, as a teenager, making baseball card sets. And he made this set called the Beautiful Baseball Card Set. And he did all these minor league things. So we had kind of corresponded a little bit because, I was buying some of his sets. And I just remember being at the show and like asking him if he had this certain player on some minor league team, and he was just so annoyed with me. And anyway, and then ever since after that, I would be like, "Oh, isn't it that guy that I used to buy baseball cards from?" So, but you go around the card show and then you see this old athlete who used to be awesome, and it makes you feel sad.
No, really?
Well,
I guess it depends. When I was a kid, I went to like the 2001 All-Star game. I'm not a kid, but I was.
yeah.
I went to the 2001 All-Star game in Seattle, and they had like this fan fest thing, and there was all these like players. I'm trying to remember who was there. It was like Brooks Robinson and like I don't know a lot, Joe Morgan, a lot of like great former greats in baseball. And I mean, as like a teenager at that time, I was like super over the moon about it. I guess it depends on your perspective, though.
I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's always weird. Like sometimes when I go to cons and I see like the veteran creators and they don't have a line and they're next to somebody who's like selling like I don't know weird Harley Quinn prints and like they have a massive line. That kind of I don't know. There's always like a weird feeling to some con type things. But thankfully, I know a lot of cons have started trying to avoid that. But actually, I do want to talk about. You started talking about, we were talking a little bit about how you approach cons and everything. I had a patron question, though, about how you kind of approach the beat. Because, you did your whole refresher. You have, like, the whole new look to the beat.
Right.
You're changing some stuff up. But the patron is wondering, like, how do you try to balance, like, comics news reviews and, like, actual, like, journalism on your site? Both as, like, they're not asking this part, but as, like, the grand poobah, but also as, like, your own approach. Because, like, do you try to, like, have special projects for yourself, basically?
So yes, yeah. I mean, short answer, yes. But I just a big shout out to Samantha Puck, who we hired. I mean, the Beat was now owned by Polarity, which is what Lion Forge is called now. So, So we have an owner and, they pay for things. We were able to hire Samantha Puck as a managing editor. And, that has just, there was before Samantha and there's after Samantha, BS and AS. Because, having another paid person who just spends time looking over the site is incredible. And Samantha has most of the same instincts as I do. But she expresses them in a very modern way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, if she were here, I hope she'd agree with that. And we discuss a lot of things, and sometimes she disagrees with me or I disagree with her. But we always come to a middle ground. But a lot of the site is kind of Samantha's take on things now, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm not going to do this forever, and unless there's other people to, like Fahrenheit 451. You got to have somebody who remembers the book, and because comics journalism isn't really a profession at all. It's just kind of a weird little sidelight that a couple people do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think we're still finding our way about that, because I definitely do have my own patented Heidi take on things. It's a little more Nikki Fink, a little bit more, snarky, I guess, but also insightful. There's a couple very good stories this week, actually, that hopefully we'll touch on. But so, I find like-minded people. And I think the number one thing that I look for in people who work for the beat is that they are smart and curious and good writers and have passion. And I guess those are the 4 foundations, right? And, as long as you get people who have 3 of those or 2.5 of those, you're going to have good content. So, and, I think my alumnus role speaks for itself. So.
Yeah, it really is kind of amazing when you look at the people who have written for you. It's, I don't know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But I did want to, I wanted to actually ask about, I know when I saw you at Emerald City, you were with Alex Liu, who's doing like new media stuff for you. And I do think that that's one thing that's interesting in how like that world has changed since you first started the beat 15 years ago, is like, once, then it was just probably written content. And now it's like, you have to do video, you have to do audio, you have to do everything else. And like, I know you guys have that, you have like a really nice intro to your video stuff now. And it's always trying to find out like how to do this content. But like, I don't know, how is like, I know you're not the managing editor anymore, but like trying to evolve along with how everything else is evolving how do you do that?
So we're still a pretty small site. We're not like comicbook.com, which, came in with like $1 million and just was like, okay, we're going to do all 5,000 of these things at once. And more power to him. I see that Jim Viscardi, my colleague, just got promoted at the parent company of that owns comicbook.com. And you know what? Good for him. Mm-hmm. That's really great that he's been able to progress there and to make a difference, be a difference maker. So the beat is still a little bit smaller than that. And so, one thing that I hope that I'm aware of is that, in my long life, semi-long life, one thing that I admire so much in leadership is leaders who know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And so, Heidi, I'm never going to pivot to video, okay? Because I did that already. We called it cable access. I've had my video days and, it's never been a passion of mine. And so I'm like, let Alex do it. He's interested in this. Let him do it. So for me, it's kind of like we're still pretty idiosyncratic. And definitely what we do on our video channel is very much what Alex tastes run to.
Mm-hmm.
He does all this Magic the Gathering stuff, dude. That's the most popular stuff on our channel. It's like Alex standing there is like, bang, 8,000 views. It's just ridiculous. And
I remember seeing a video where somebody was opening like an old pack of cards, a pack of Magic cards. I don't even collect Magic cards, but somehow I ended up watching this, and it had like, they got this very rare card, and it was like viewed an absurd amount of times. But that's the thing though, is like when you're talking about all these things that could tangentially be on the beat, it like it's such a huge world. It's unbelievable. Not even just like the audio, video, and written content, but also just all the different things you theoretically could cover. I mean, it's like when you go to like CBR or comicbook.com at this point, it's like what percentage of it is actually purely comics? And not as much. Not as much as you probably think.
I need to do another audit, I should remember 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
That audit of all the sites where I counted up all the stories. I think it'd be, now we'd have to include ourselves in that. But, it's
evolving.
It is evolving. And like I said, I'm not, if I'm sitting here and somebody says to me, Heidi, do you think this will work on TikTok? I'll be like, I am the wrong person to ask. Okay. Like, don't ask me. I mean, not that anybody would, but, you
don't have hot takes on TikTok?
Well, I mean, I loved Vine. I thought Vine was awesome.
I did too.
And it definitely was the one thing that gave me this feeling, old timer alert. When we didn't have instant streaming and the internet, like watching cable TV was the absurdest late night, getting stoned thing that people would do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, you never knew what you'd find. And, Vine just replicated that on a moment by moment basis. And, so, that is missed. Twitter, good on you. You shut down the one thing that didn't get overrun by trolls, asshole. So yeah, I mean, that's it. It's like, I'll throw this out here, people. We are expanding. We are going to do more podcasts, and we are going to do more videos, and we are going to do more long form content. Like, we really want to, like, that is my mandate. My first mandate from was to make the site a little more well-rounded, and that it covered like entertainment with the same kind of approach that we had to comics, and we've done that. And now my mandate is to go out. What we're looking at now is really trying to do more things that matter, I guess. So yeah, if you're listening and you have some ideas, pitch me. I'm not hard to find on there. Find me very easily. So my DMs are open there. I've said it. Okay. So, if you have some ideas, we are looking for ideas. So after New York Comic Con, don't do it before the con.
There's always the window. You don't talk to people during, like, right before a con and then right after a con. You gotta give a window. But, one type of content you used to have, I had a patron question about a specific type, was, somebody was asking about, like, this is the question. The beat used to take the available sales data in the direct market and do monthly analysis columns to see what is trending up and down. That's been gone for a while. Wasn't that Todd Allen?
No, Todd. Well, Todd did his own take on that. But yeah, we had these guys who did the sales charts. Yes, the sales charts are coming back. Absolutely.
They're going to be very happy.
They are, and I will be too. And that is something that kind of fell by the wayside through some, internal glitches. And also, when we were sold to Lion Forge, one of the people who was doing our sales charts couldn't continue doing it because it was a conflict of interest for him to take money from a publisher. So he stopped, and then it was kind of like, we have to find people. So guess what? It's not very easy to find people who can do this kind of stuff growing on trees. So so again, if you are listening and you would like to try to do sales charts, well, hit me up. HMU. We are looking. We would love to do that. It just, you have to prove that you can do it. I mean, I've had many people say they could and then they couldn't. And I'll say this is the back pat little section. I can't even say it, so I'm so ashamed of it.
You're patting yourself on the back.
I'm about to pat myself on the back, yes. And I will just say, like, my vetting approach to these things is very arcane, but I'm usually not wrong. But once again, tempting fate, knock wood. When I am wrong, I'm spectacularly wrong. But usually when I think that a person is, I don't know, I can see the signs.
Sure.
I can see the signs of whether they are a lifer or a loafer.
I really hope that the end result of this podcast isn't you getting sick because New York Comic Con with a bad new employee, because that would be a bad combination. Well, I think
we pretty much doomed it at this point. So.
Well, let's doom something else. We're not going to do
Okay.
it. But I do want to talk about, we mentioned the direct market. That's not everything, but I think 2019 has been a really interesting year, not just in direct market, but everywhere. Like we've been seeing a lot of very interesting things happen in the comic industry. It started with a lot of like very unhappy retailers speaking up. A lot of, and even some of the atypical ones, like Phil Boyle was speaking, and I think holy crap, Joe Field actually like wrote something that got out into the world, and so it started in one way. But then I feel like as 2019 has went along, and this is possibly infused by like the just sheer enthusiasm related to the House of X, Powers of 10 relaunch, it feels like it's kind of turned around a bit. Like, how do you feel? Like, what do you feel this year has been like in comics? Like, do you feel like it's been a good year? Do you feel like we're kind of coming out of something, or do you think it's much the same?
Well, we're going through a transitional period, and I know that we talked about this, like the first time we talked, I said we are entering a period of disruption. I know that because I see on the title of the podcast, you said period of disruption with Heidi MacDonald. And and then I see the next one was called Boom and Bust with Heidi MacDonald. So we are, and the one before was called The Times They Are A-Changin'. So see, just like my New York Comic Con reports, are very, very very steady here. But however, if you looked at where we were in 2015 as opposed to where we are now, you would definitely see that things have really changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was two stories this week that I alluded to earlier that I think are big benchmark stories. Well, one of them is the end of a story, and the other is the beginning of the at the end of the middle. Maybe.
This is so omominous. What are these stories?
So the one story was that the New York Times finally announced they're bringing back the graphic novel bestseller list, or graphic books, as they must call it, because
they're integrating everything.
Some of them are nonfiction, so how can you call it a novel? But so I alluded to this in the piece that I wrote on the Beat today, but I forgot a little part of the story because I wrote the story in quite a bit of haste. And so I remembered that it was about 10 years ago that, and this is where my failing memory curses me, but there was an actual graphic novel that showed up on the New York Times bestseller list, legit. And I think it might have been Watchmen, because it was right around the time. And certainly that book had sold so much. But, and I know that this upset the people at the New York Times. So they created a graphic novel bestseller list so they wouldn't have to put the graphic novels on the real book list. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I remember at the time a lot of people were upset by it in the industry, but then
it went away.
They had three lists. They had the manga list, they had the paperback list, and they had the hardcover list. So then you had three chances to be a bestseller. And then everybody, I mean, look at how many people on their Twitter bio say, New York Times bestselling author,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of a boom time. But then the New York Times got the book review section got some new management. And so, I worked for Publishers Weekly for a long time. I think the first time we talked, I was working there. So I've been around book people quite a bit, and I've seen book attitudes quite a bit. And, I don't think it's too hard to see that even at Publishers Weekly, there's a lot of people who have been there, with the exception of the fabulous Calvin Reed, who's been at Publishers Weekly forever, who's like a real, prophet for evangelizing for comics. But a lot of the older people there aren't really into graphic novels, but almost all the younger staff is really into graphic novels.
Mm-hmm.
So there is still a certain snobism about comics and graphic novels in the book world. That's just at this kind of highest levels. And, that said, PW is very accepting. It's like they don't get it, but they don't hate them either. But anyway, I could just tell that some of the people at the New York Times were just like, ugh, why do we have to do this list? Graphic novels. And so they cut that list as 3 years ago, and then they cut like the mass market paperback list. So the two quote unquote crappiest, formats, the crappiest content they cut. And today they announced that both were coming back. So I had noticed that several graphic novels had actually made the Times bestseller list again. Mm. One of them was Adventure Zone. That was last year. That was the graphic novel by the McCaffreys.
McElroys.
McElroys, yeah. That's just, a phenomenon. And then the other, I noticed that They Called Us Enemy by George Takei had also made the New York Times. I think I wrote a story about that. I was excited to see it. And this is, now we enter the speculation zone, that I suspect that at the Times they were just like, ugh, now these books are coming back. We got to get rid of them again. So, give them their own list. But guess what? Now the circle is completed.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I actually kind of like that they're integrating all of it. Like that it's going to be all in one, and because it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all shakes out. Because I mean, I tend to think, and I wrote this in a column that's going up tomorrow. It's like I tend to think that it'll be probably fairly heavy children's and manga typically.
Sure.
But I mean, at the same time, it'll be interesting to see kind of how like how things like spike up to number one, and like, what sticks around for the longest, which ones are just kind of, because I feel like some of like let's say like there won't be a new Walking Dead volume anymore, but like when that one would have dropped, like that probably would have been opened at number one regardless of what was out there, but it probably wouldn't stick around for the second week. And so it's always interesting to see how those things last. And and that, like, that ties into like that librarian article I wrote. Like, the nice thing about this whole thing, the New York Times bestseller list coming back, is it really helps legitimize comics for a lot of people.
It does.
And it gives people a lot of ammunition, whether you're like a book buyer for a bookstore or for a library or whatever. It like gives you really great grounds to say, like, this is important. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's like, we have to carry it. And it's like, right. Fine, comic book, whatever, do it. So that helps. Like, that's a huge thing.
It is, absolutely. And, over at Publishers Weekly, where they run their bestseller list based on a slightly different metric, they take the book scan numbers into account. I mean, Wimpy Kid, I know, is it a graphic novel? No, it isn't, but it sort of is an illustrated book. And, it's very much on the cusp. That's the biggest series going right now in books. And obviously Raina Telgemeier has been the best. And Dog Man, I mean, Dave Pilkey, his books sell like, they sold something like 600,000 copies last year. And,
I thought like the print runs were like millions. I guess that's the print run.
I'm saying, if you look on BookScan,
right.
The best-selling graphic novel last year, which we were allowed to run the numbers, was something like 600,000 copies. Now that's under, so probably sold more like 1 million. But yeah, and the print runs of these books are in the millions. So these are real numbers. These are numbers that cannot be denied. Everyone will chase these numbers.
And they are.
Mm-hmm.
See, actually, another thing that I think is really interesting that's coming from this year is that, I guess it's technically going to hit next year. It's like BookScan and Comic Hub have a deal where they're going to actually have sell-through for single issues for Comic Hub related, or Comic Hub stores. Comic Hub being the retailer suite of tools for people who don't know that. Like, I at the time when I talked to Stu from Comic Hub, was like in the 90s. It might be higher now, but anyway, so it's like you're not going to get insight into what everything is selling, like what the top seller is across the board, but it will be interesting to see any sell-through numbers for single issue comics. And I don't know, I don't know if Brian Hibbs is gonna have that in his breakdown, but that's gonna be a really fascinating wrinkle.
Right. And, this is, like I said, it's not a giant number sample size, but it's a number. It's a metric. It's a metric. And we've never, I keep saying this, we have never had these numbers, David.
Sell-throughs, that's
And
impossible.
If they were to go, this is the real change, because this is, I said this on our final wrap-up video at San Diego, and I've said it on the Publishers Weekly podcast, and now I'll say it on your podcast. If we were ever to get the sell-through numbers on periodicals or pamphlets, comic books out of comic shops, this would be the ground-shaking, game-changing, and this would change everything. Because right now we have this whole shell game of, not even a shell game, it's the wrong term, but we have this game of retailers guessing how many they'll sell and publishers trying to run the numbers so that retailers would think that they'll sell more, and like the actual end user customer isn't even part of that equation, Right. And so it's a very artificial system that doesn't really exist in any other medium. And, so the other story that I alluded to was that Diamond distributors had a big shakeup this week.
Oh yeah, they had like a bunch of new people. Was it new people on their board?
Well, people just got like a new parent company, a new guy running the parent company, and then Chuck Parker, who's been running Diamond for a long time, got a new title, which was Chief of Staff.
Mm-hmm. I know. I was really surprised by that when I saw Chief of Staff. I'm like, that feels like a downgrade.
Is he like Tyrion Lannister? I mean,
He's the hand of the king.
the Hand of the King? I mean, yeah, what does that mean exactly? I mean, the Hand of the King doesn't come out so well.
Right.
Roger Fletcher left. Roger's a friend. He's been there for a long time. And Bill Shanus was another old timer at Diamond. He actually retired a few years ago, and we're Facebook friends, and he's just been going around the world. He's been to like something like 120 countries, and like growing his beard, it's like down to his belt buckle now. It's like Tolkienian length. I mean, I don't know if Roger will grow a beard, but I think he was ready for his world tour. I mean, I'm guessing. I don't know, Roger, if you're listening. Miss you, buddy. No, hail and well met, fellow. I'm sure we'll see him at New York Comic Con anyway. But well, here's the bottom line, David. Diamond has not changed its terms in which, like, when you sign up as a comic shop and you sign, it has not changed its terms in 20 years.
That is like the comic book way, though, isn't it? I mean, it's just like that's like one of the fundamental issues, especially with like the direct market. Is it's like, we're partying like it's 1999.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
everywhere.
Yeah, and you know what? That can only last for so long.
Right. So how do you think that's going to affect things? I mean, it's kind of hard to say. It's like it's more of just a shakeup right now, but it's like. I guess I think it was maybe it was Brian Hibbs that wrote about this, but I remember somebody saying about how like Steve Geppi is getting older, and it's like somebody's going to have to like take over that empire, or God only knows what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is all his doing,
right?
I mean, he's not dumb,
right? And
he foresaw that he needed to put in some structures, for the future, and so good, good for him. I mean, is everybody going to be happy? I doubt it. And is it going to affect me? I don't know. I mean, this could be horrible for all of us, but something had to be done. It just couldn't go on. It's like with the Beat. It's like I bet you I've said this on your podcast before, but one of my favorite lines is the last line of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
I don't think I've heard this one.
Where they're falling, and she says, "I wish I was with you back in the desert." I wish we could go back to this magic moment when everything was wonderful.
Yeah.
And well, that doesn't, it didn't work for those guys in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and it doesn't work for Diamond or comics either. So, we'll never go back. We can't go back to the island. And, I wish I could be like the Beat sometimes, like, just woke up and, wrote about Gerard Butler and Little Lulu all day, and that was it. I called it a day,
Yeah.
And then I would get, people would just ship me all this free stuff, and it was great. It's not like that anymore.
I mean, you could write about Gerard Butler all day, but I'm not really sure what you would write about. I guess he just had that Has Fallen. What was that movie called?
Oh, yeah. Something fell. Heaven fell.
Oh, yeah. I think it's Heaven Has Fallen. And then there was like Olympus Has Fallen. This is like the third one. I'm just like, how are there so many White House movies starring Gerard Butler? It's like his entire career at this point.
Yeah. But, there was a whole, not to segue too much into Gerard Butler, but I mean, he is having kind of this mid-career resurgence where people are like, that guy's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, his house burned down, so people feel bad about that.
I didn't even know that. I don't know. I have no problem with Gerard Butler. He was the voice of the dad in the How to Train Your Dragon movies.
Yes.
He's great.
Yes.
Those movies are awesome.
Yeah, he seems okay. But anyway, yeah, I mean, Diamond, we're seeing, so I keep saying, at the very first New York Comic Con, I did a panel with Brian Hibbs, Dan DiDio, and Dave Roman that was called "Is the Pamphlet Doomed?" So I've been trying.
You've been on that corner for a bit.
I've been on that, yeah, and I'm always wrong. So I'm not going to say it's doomed, but it's this business model is totally being propped up right now by variant covers. And, the word on the street is that there's going to be a lot of, like DC's time due for a reboot.
Sure.
And I mean, all the changes that have gone on there. I mean, the doomsday clock of the periodical market is that Marvel or DC, or rather Warner Brothers, now AT&T or Disney, would just one day wake up and say, "Hey, why are we publishing these 32-page pamphlets again?"
Hmm.
And I mean, we seem to be a lot closer to that at DC than we've ever been before. They cut their line, they, shook things up, they got rid of their booth at San Diego.
See, I don't agree with that with DC. I actually think, I mean, I could just be completely naive in this, but I look at it as good business. Like I don't know why they have a huge booth at San Diego. I don't know why they would have such a big line. I mean, honestly, like all the things that they were doing are probably a result of the inputs that they were taking in, so they had to change their outputs. I mean, like they probably weren't getting a lot of benefit out of San Diego. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, look at Chuck Rosansky. I mean, Chuck Rosansky has been very public about how poorly that went for him. Obviously, a different setup than what DC was doing, but still, I mean, I look at their line, like they had so many books that just weren't selling as much. Like trying to find a way to like do it differently. My only problem with them is like I mean, I know a lot of people strongly disagree with me about this, but I found the whole reorganization to be very confusing because I actually liked the way that the imprints worked. It made it very structured in a logical way to me. And now it's like three, like, I don't know, like a DC Ink book is technically the same as a DC book. So that gets just kind of weird to me. And then like what is or isn't Black Label at this point, but whatever. But I don't know. I find all their moves to be very defensible and kind of logical from a business standpoint. I don't know.
I I yes. Well, I mean, I think they did need to change. I think they did need to shake things up, but I do think some of them are being made for the wrong reasons.
Sure.
And a lot of this, I mean, DC's corporate structure has had a huge shakeup. Warner Brothers was acquired by AT&T. AT&T has come in and put their stamp on a lot of things, and they put a lot of wonks in charge. They have not put people who put creativity first in charge. And I've seen this happen before, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. And so I mean, the big thing everybody's talking about now is this Joker movie.
Ugh.
And, there was a quote from Todd Phillips, the director, where he said, "We managed to make a serious movie by pretending it was a comic book movie." And, I mean, I don't know if that was a real quote. Somebody had a screenshot of that.
Sure.
That could also be, I might have just parroted a who talking point or something. However, I do know that a lot of the I'd say the higher echelons of Warner Brothers have long had many people who had a similar feeling about comics and graphic novels as the New York Times Book Review did.
Oh, sure.
And they definitely.
Why are we doing this?
Yeah, well, they just look down on them, and they felt ashamed of things like, Dark Knight Returns, the Christopher Nolan trilogy. I mean, that was they could get behind because it was serious.
Right.
But other things succeeding has not been it's a little bit ashamed of things doing well, like Suicide Squad. I mean, we should all be ashamed of that. But
hey, Oscar winner. Yeah.
Oscar-winning Suicide Squad,
which somehow led to somebody like the producer becoming a part of the Trump administration. Amazing! What a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just look. I mean, really, if you wanted to tell the best story of the past 10 years, it would be Warner Brothers' quest to compete with Disney, with Marvel, because it's just such a ludicrous string of bizarre occurrences.
I mean, poor Ezra Miller. That guy is going to be like 50 by the time he plays The Flash again. It's crazy.
I don't feel sorry for him. He's got some powerful friends at Warner Brothers. And also, just real quick, I didn't get a chance to write about this week, but, poor Diane Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
And, who was running, there was this very brief period when DC was really the hot, property at Warner Brothers, and Diane was running it, and she was in line to take over consumer products, and, there was love in the air. They moved DC to the West Coast. It was also cool and groovy, and she was best friends with Jeff Johns. I was talking about it. And then Like said something about the Snyder Cut on Twitter, and then somebody said, "Oh, it was your friend Jeff Johns who, killed that." And then she tweeted, "He's no friend of mine."
Ooh,
And then she had to take down her whole Twitter account. And we're like, "Woo,
that's
man!"
hot. I didn't know
Oh,
that.
well, there's a lot more to that story.
That's amazing.
There's a lot more to that story. And so someday someone's going to write a book about all this. I'll say this. Diane Nelson is a really kind person. Very, people who know, I've met her a few times. I mean, I don't claim to know her well, but people who do know her really speak highly of her. And she's got a job with this production company that's doing a lot of stuff with Apple that I can't remember the name of. It's got a pretty bad name, to be fair. But anyway, I hope she's very successful there. She deserves to do well and have good things happen to her.
Well, we're talking about DC. One of the things I gave you a few prompts before this, some lists to talk about, and one of the ones I want to bring up is just like if you could pick like 3 comic publishers of any variety that you're the most curious about over the next year, the ones you'll be kind of watching, who would they be?
Well, DC, obviously, for the reasons that we just mentioned. I don't feel that the changes are over there, and I feel that between what's going on at Diamond and what's going on at DC, I mean, this is the crux of the Levitz Wayne model of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Paul Levitz and Bob Wayne at DC created this whole world that we're living in, and they're not around anymore. So we are going to see this structure is going to collapse and or evolve.
Right.
I don't want to say, might not be negative. I don't want to be negative now. It could just evolve. It's going to evolve into something different. And we just see all the signs of that happening. So absolutely DC. And so them, I guess the second one, I mean, there were so many new publishers that started
so many.
last year. Yes. And they all have the Hollywood guy with some money and, just running through them. I mean, there's TKO and they kind of came, but they went away, but now they're coming back again.
Mm-hmm.
Vault had its ups and downs. There's Ahoy Comics,
AWA.
AWA. So I guess I would kind of pick of all those AWA.
Yeah.
Because Bill Jemas, who's running it, is just such an unusual guy.
I was really interested to see what words you picked there.
Yes. He is he and I had a lovely talk at the Retailer Summit, actually. He sees the world in his own unique way. I'm going to put it that way.
Sure.
And so, they just announced some new books that, we're not on their press release list. They send it all to some other website. So, maybe someday AWA will talk to the beat, not just standing in an aisle at a trade show. There's just been a lot of weird stuff going on there. Like Gabe Yoakum left Reed Pop to go work for them. And then like 2 days later, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go back to Reed Pop. So, and I think, but they're very well funded.
Right.
They got all this money from all these funders because Bill Jemas is the kind of person who can go in and say, I need money. And they give him money and we'll see where that goes. So, can you launch a new comics company? I mean, Aftershock, they've been around for 5 years, hanging in there. Valiant. I guess, okay, for the third company to watch, I guess I'm going to do 3.5. Okay. So I'd say Valiant, it's kind of a do or die year for them.
Yeah.
Because the Bloodshot movie is coming out. And so we'll see how that does. And, here we go. Let's see, do or die. They've been trying for a long time. They have Chinese money. Let's see what happens with that. So I think it will be, it's the culmination of a lot of things. So the other one half of that is, of course, terrific production.
Oh my God. How dare you? That's amazing. Is that the guy on Twitter?
Yeah, of course, yes.
See, I 100% believe that, and I had some people, like, I was talking to somebody, and they're like, there's no way that's not real. People are just accepting this, and I'm like, I think it is real. Like, I mean, I don't think, like, Eric Larson and Rob Liefeld would have acted like it was real if it wasn't real, because they know the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know, it's so wild.
Well, the guy is Andrew Rev.
Yeah.
And there's no internet trail of his deeds, which is too bad. But I do know if you see Bill Willingham and bring up his name, be prepared to duck. And, there is a trail of woe and tears that this guy has left behind him. And no, he's not kidding. He is not kidding. And
His Twitter is unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
It is so amusing. I mean, there is I think some of my writers just at 5:00, it's like, okay, work is done. Well, before I go home, let's see what Terrific Production is doing.
That contest they did was pretty amazing. I mean, it lasted approximately 3 hours before they turned it off. But I mean, I loved it. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm kind of like of mixed feelings. I'm like, should I be encouraging this by like talking about it? But then at the same time, I'm like, this is deeply fascinating and also really funny. It's like, it's like a car crash, but on Twitter.
It is a real, and listen, I will say this. You've got to feel for Rob Liefeld.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people are mad at Rob Liefeld and hold grudges against him. But I will say, if you look, he made his deal with Scott Rosenberg, who's a known devil. But then if you'd found out that Rosenberg, for whatever reason, although he says it wasn't him, it was this partner that nobody's ever heard of, had done a deal with this guy who, let's face it, has some obvious mental issues. I'd be pretty damn upset. Because my likelihood of ever making money off of this property again just went into the crapper.
Yeah, I remember when I was reading that, I was just like his write up about all the stuff that happened. I was like, this is like the most mystifying story I have ever read in my entire life. Like, how did all these things happen? It was astonishing. But I do have to say, I'm very surprised you didn't say Random House Graphic, given the fact that they're launching next year. Very surprised.
Well,
you know that they're going to succeed, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, are they? Probably. I mean, to me, that's just like a normal story.
So they're not that interesting because of that?
Well, no, it's not as interesting because they know what they're doing.
Right.
It's so much more interesting when people don't know what they're doing, don't you think?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, as an observer.
Well, it is interesting, too, because it's like, I don't know. I've had this like idea in my head. I mean, this is not really an insight, but the idea of comics as minor leagues, and it's almost like all of the publishers you talked about look at it like that to a certain degree. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for Valiant. Valiant, at least when Dinesh Shamdasani was there, it kind of felt like he was very enthusiastic about comics. But now it feels more like they're doing the IPs. It's very IP oriented, and. AWA, it feels very much the same way. And it feels like those are just kind of like, I don't know. I have a hard time separating which new publishers are trying to make comics and which ones are trying to foster IP. And if there is any separation there.
Right. Yeah. Well, most of them say they want to make comics first, and then most of them just make these IP grab comics. And it never really works. The one who did it the best was Radical. Remember them?
Oh God, yeah. And then
but they made 2 crappy movies.
Yeah, they adapted that The Last Days of American Crime by Rick Remender and Greg Tacchini. I remember.
There were 3 then.
Yeah. I don't know if they ever actually finished that. I remember that was announced as being. I mean, that's the thing is like I've seen so many comics been optioned. I have no idea what has or hasn't been made at this point. Yeah, no.
But oh, go on, David.
No, I was just gonna say I just find it to be very fascinating. I will say I don't really. I know TKO definitely like seemingly has like a IP focus, but at the same time, like this is not me casting aspersions about what Joshua Dysart and Alberto Ponticelli did, but Good Night Paradise, I think it was the book. That is not really like an IP focused book. That was a good comic, and it's like I don't know how you sell something like that to a production company at the same time.
So I was shocked to find out that there's this new show on Netflix called Daybreak coming. Have you heard about that?
Mm-mm. Okay. Wait. The comic, the comic that was it Fantagraphics or was it D&Q?
Yeah, no,
Brian Ralph.
It was High Water Press. Yeah, Brian Ralph.
I have that. It's a good comic.
I know, I have it too. But I mean, this is like a Netflix show. I mean, I had no concept that this was based on. This is a super indie book by a super indie guy. I mean, I think the first volume was published by High Water Press.
Sure.
That was Tom Devlin's company before he went to Drawn and Quarterly. I mean, and then D&Q picked it up. But, this is as indie as it gets. I mean, the end of the effing world, that's as indie as it gets. So what I was just about to say is that, as we look at this pamphlet evolution, I mean, I guess the reason why I'm not as interested in the book market is because it's doing so well.
Right.
And I mean, I keep pointing, we don't really have the sales charts. I do my little sales thing where I look at the diamond, and I keep saying this, and nobody seems to think it's important but me. But the last month, August, the top 10 graphic novels in comic shops by units shipped was The Walking Dead, The Batman Who Laughs. Number 3 was Harley Quinn, Breaking Glass. All right, that's a beautiful, amazing book, by the way. Mariko Tamaki and Steve Pugh. But guess what? It is whatever DC thinks is YA. Okay, it's YA, aimed at kids. Watchmen is number 4, War of the Realms, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Star Wars, Vader. Then at number 8, Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir, published by Action Labs. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Okay, so if you have kids, you would know what Miraculous was. It's this French cartoon that they made some books. I guess the cartoon's on like the Roku channel or something. Anyway, that's a number 8 graphic novel. Number 9 is Disney Descendants, Evie's Wicked Runway, Volume 2, published by Tokyo Pop. Number 10 is Guardians of the Galaxy. But I'm seeing this every month on these comic shop lists, is that they're selling, even comic shops are selling more YA comics, more children's comics, they're smart. They already figured out that they need to pivot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I talked to Brian Hibbs on my podcast. I keep name dropping Brian Hibbs. Apparently, this is Brian Hibbs hour. But we were talking about like how big graphic novels have been for him, and just he saw the writing on the wall a long time ago. But it seems like other shops have started to pivot in that way more. But it is still really interesting looking at like the book scan numbers and then comparing that to the end of the year charts for graphic novel sales. It's just like the difference between those lists. It's like, I don't know. It's like two completely different industries were like looking at the same medium. But
I'm telling you, they're going to get closer together.
It's changing. It's definitely changing. Yeah, I don't know. I find like the whole thing to be really interesting. And you're right. Like if like Daybreak, at least I could say like that is zombies-ish. You could say that there's like the zombie element to it. But then with I don't know. I guess anything really can be adapted at this point. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Netflix is so thirsty for everything. They're going to like turn this podcast into a 12 episode series. Well, I'm going to finish with just a few quick like lightning round things. I do want to bring us back to New York Comic Con. I gave you some other lists to talk about. What are 3 things you hope to see happen at the con this year? Are there any things you're hoping for?
Well, I hope that the con somehow isn't quite as crowded and that people can go to the bathroom more readily, because the bathroom situation has become very, very bad over the last few years. Like, even men takes half an hour to go.
That's wild.
I heard that from several guys. And they weren't exaggerating. They were saying it's just they had to stand in such long lines. So I'm hoping to see just like they went back to selling 4-day badges. So there actually could be fewer people there, or just a touch fewer. So I just hope not to see the horrible gridlock that sometimes happens at that show. The other thing I hope to see is just the press room is still where it was, and it's still open, and we can go hide there. I mean, it really is. Going to the actual show is just, it's grueling. It's just grueling. Nobody enjoys it. No one enjoys walking around at New York Comic Con. But the third thing I want to see is Artist Alley. And, they had that great area that was, now it was a shed. They tore it down. That was so wonderful to go there. And it's not quite as nice where it is in the hall, but, no fault of Reed Pops. I mean, they just have to put it there. But it is the finest Artist Alley in North America, bar none, period.
I miss that old space. I've only been to it, the con. I haven't been to the con since like 2013 or 2014. But I gotta say, I mean, like looking at the Artist Alley list, it is astonishing. Like, I swear to God, I was like scrolling for like 5 minutes before I got out of the A's. I mean, the list of people who are going to be there is just astonishing. And it's also like, it's an incredible mix of creators too. It's like a bunch of old school creators, a bunch of new school creators, and everything in between. And I like that.
So, David, what are you looking forward to?
So I'm looking, this is like a very modest thing that I want to start with, but I really want it to be in the 70s, not the 80s. I'm from Alaska. I need to not die. Uh, I honestly like as far cons are kind of weird for me because I'm not really into panels. I'm not really like a big panel person. I'm mostly there. Like I really want to see people. Like there's a whole lot of people I want to see. You know what's funny? Like I actually wrote this down. I wrote down. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't fanboy. I'm not a fanboy. That's not how I roll. But I would really love to meet Jim Lee. That is I have this like the first graphic novel I ever got, Heidi, was a copy of the X-Men story Extinction Agenda. And it is like torn to pieces at this point because I read it like it was like the only thing in the world when I was a kid. And it was one of the things that got me into comics. And like, I know I'm not Sasson, Rob Liefeld, or John Bogdanove, but like when I read that comic, it was like a clear hierarchy in whose art I love the most. And I read those Jim Lee issues over and over and over. It's like without Jim Lee, I would not be talking to you right now, despite the fact that I don't really read Jim Lee comics anymore. So it's, I don't know. I mean, like, if I had the opportunity to like get him to sign my ancient broken copy of Extinction Agenda, I would be all about it. And like, I don't know, maybe that's crossing like some sort of professionalism line, but whatever. I do what I want.
But doesn't that go back to what I was saying earlier in the podcast, or what we were talking about? About getting to meet people that just are really genuine and creative.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things. Like I said, I'm really excited about the. And then that's the third thing. It's just Artist Alley, like you said. I'm like really excited just to walk around there and just. I love going to con Artist Alleys and just like finding people I'd never seen before. And like, like there's a person whose work I really love now, Liana Kangas, and I met her at Emerald City Comic Con this year, and she is just like an incredible person. She has just a ton of stuff. She's got a great presence. I love seeing like, up and coming creators really making their presence felt there.
Yeah.
Like, it's just great. So those are three things I'm excited about. Yeah. So the last question I have for you before we go. All right, you're a New Yorker. I am not. You know the area more than me. If you could tell me 3 places I had to eat or I should eat, where would you tell me?
Okay, so just around the Javits?
No, period. My wife
period.
and I are coming on Sunday, and we're going to be there until the following Monday. So
Okay.
I'm hoping to get some good food.
Okay, so I'm not a real foodie. So a lot of people, Alex Liu's the guy you got to talk to. I don't know if you follow his Instagram, but he comes. We had a meeting earlier this week, and he comes in and says, "Oh, I just ate a frozen s'more." I mean, this guy really knows where all the good food is. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll give you some solid New York recs here. So a place I love is Barn Jew 35 is Korean food.
Ooh,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, it's on 35th between 5th and 6th, and they have the most haunting fried chicken that I've ever had in my life. And I
Haunting in
know,
a good way?
oh yeah, haunting. And it's like if you I mean, Korean restaurants are known for their fried chicken. That is my favorite fried chicken. And then everything else there is just on point. They have these tiger prawn rolls where the prawn is hot. The prawn is cold and the outside is deep fried and it's hot, and they have both temperatures at once. They really do it right. It's on point. So that's a really good place, and that's not too far from the Javits. So, I just went, and this is super touristy, but I gotta say they just do it so well. Is Italy and the
Oh, yeah.
rooftop of Italy. Okay. So that place, and they just put in their fall. And I mean, if you like wine and cheese, which I do, it's really outstanding. So we went there when they had the flowers, the sunset was coming. It was just like this. I've never seen anything like it. It was just absolutely insane.
We went there in Vegas, and it was awesome. It was great.
Oh, okay. Well, the one in New York, it's that definitely, again, the food is simple, but it's so well made. It really is enjoyable. So that's like I said, a little touristy, but I just had a great meal there. So let's see, number 3. What is, if I really had to show off some joy of New York stuff. See, I eat mostly Asian food.
That's fun.
So I'm hard to like. I wish I could tell you a good pizza place, but oh well, okay. So this is really this is a little bit more on the Italy tip, but I just started there. This is right in my neighborhood. This is a neighborhood gem. Okay, so in right where I live, on the end of my block is a sandwich shop that's called Lamasu, and they have been there quite a while, and they have like their own cheese cellar, and they age the cheese, and it's just they really do. I stopped going there a few years ago because of some kind of neighborhood issues, and
Mhm.
also like, oh, you're not supposed to eat bread anymore, like no more sandwiches for you, right? So I was like, I can never go to the sandwich shop. Then recently I was just like, you know what, life's too short, and also my other favorite go-to sandwich shop closed, so I went there. You know what, oh my god, their sandwiches are just off the hook. But I just thought of a fourth place, and I've been ranting about this on Twitter, but there's this chain of coffee places called Le Cafe.
Uh-huh.
Their breakfast sandwiches
Ooh.
they're just incredible.
Now we're talking. I'm a breakfast fiend. I mean, I love
you
all
are.
food. So like yeah, that's the thing that always makes me sad. I remember when I was part of Multiversity Comics, and I remember we went to go get Dunkin' Donuts right after I got off like this 13 hours of travel, and I was a
Right.
zombie, and they take me to Dunkin' Donuts, and I was like, this is the greatest food I've ever had. But I'm like, imagine that, but if I had like actually really good food. No slander to Dunkin',
Right.
but I imagine like cafe or like, I don't know, even like a bodega, like bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich would probably be better than that. But
Right, but with the bacon, egg, and cheese is also, the bodega sandwiches. Like you gotta really, I mean, would be a life's work. I mean, I would, weigh 5,000 pounds before I finished finding that. So but anyway, the Le Cafe is like they just make these sandwiches with like this olive oil mayonnaise or something. I don't
okay.
know. They put everything on an everything bagel and they toast it just right.
I was
It's
so there's this place that's pretty close to where we're staying, and it's like it has supposedly has like one of the best sandwiches. And I found this list that said it was one of the best sandwiches in New York, and it's a sea urchin sandwich.
mm,
And I'm like, I don't know, like I don't think I've ever had sea urchin. I don't think I've ever thought, man, I really wish this was on a sandwich if I did. But,
ah,
but I'm very curious about it. I don't know. I'm like a lot of my things in New York, I'm just like, I want to see people, but also I'm like, can we get food while we're doing it?
right. Well, that's it. That's what I'm saying about traveling. And yeah, I've never had sea urchin. I'm afraid I'd have some kind of allergic reaction to it, so I've just never had it. But the thing about New York food is that it's all pretty good. We don't have the best ingredients. You and I talked about this in Seattle.
Yeah.
Our ingredients are not fresh. It's actually one of the reasons why I really like Italy, because they get all their produce from the farmers market,
Mm.
and it's really a step above. It really is good. And but if you go on Yelp and you look around and you see, oh, this place has 4 stars, it's probably going to be good.
See, that's my problem though, is like looking on Google, looking on Yelp, looking on everything. There's like 70 million restaurants. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It's funny because I'm drinking from a fire hose of just restaurant options. But you've given me some good ones to pick from. Heidi, I am prepared for New York Comic Con now. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for coming on and
All right.
talking
Wait,
about the.
before I go, can I plug one thing?
Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. You have to redo your clothes.
No,
Okay.
no. No.
Okay.
I'm
right.
a casual show.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have to plug this panel that I'm on that was organized by Elena Lavin of
Graphic Policy.
Yes, and it's called Gangsters, Lovers, Heroes, Warriors, and Gods: Jack Kirby's Women.
Ooh,
And it is an all-woman panel talking about Jack Kirby.
that's awesome.
And I don't. Right. This has never been done before. So it's me, Elena, Jay Justice, the cosplayer, Cecil Castellucci, and Ariana Mello are going to be on it. And
When is it?
And Meg Downey. It is Thursday at 1:30.
Nice. That is awesome. Well, if you're going to New York Comic Con, go to that. Heidi, thank you so much for coming on. I'll see you next week.
All right, David. Safe travel.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with the Beat's Heidi MacDonald. You can find her on Twitter at ComicsAce and her work on The Beat at comicsbeat.com. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at SketchComic or following me at @SlicedFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Danny Ollie, Paul Salates, Litwin Studios, Akil Wilson, Andrew Nikovich, Nathan House, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Leona Kangas, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Connor Farner, Vita Ayala, JDC and Mac Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Panillo, Kent Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Bill Knoll, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Cole McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Ken McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Fiona Staples, Chris Hallren, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics Start in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in not next week, but the following week for another episode.